For years, eyewitnesses have been seeing mysterious upright canine creatures that they cannot describe, and has left many mystery into the world. It is unknown what lurks around into these creatures, but with sketches, drawings, and thousands of accounts, the mystery is. Join us as we talk about Dogman, the most terrifying cryptid in the world.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to another episode of the 10 Tales of Dogman. Tonight's episode is dedicated to the folk in Wisconsin as we discuss the Wisconsin Dogman. And tonight's guest is none other than Ricardo Sanchez, who has a lot of stories to talk to us about involving this subject. Ricardo, welcome to the 10 Tales of Dogman. How are you tonight, my friend?
I'm doing good, Chris. I'm doing very good.
So, Ricardo, give us a little brief bio on who you are and, of course, what got you into the Dogman field.
Well, I'm a correctional officer by trade. I've been trained in everything that has to do with the emergency response unit at the prisons. So I'm used throughout the state in case an emergency strikes. I'm also CIP certified, which is a crisis intervention partnership, which are the people that help before a crisis intervention or a negotiation team comes in. Also, I train dogs. At my property, I have a dog club that joins every 2 weeks to train dogs. Like the outdoors, like to hike. Pretty much, that's about it.
Very interesting profession, too. That's pretty nice, training dogs, and how ironic, training dogs and then into the Dogman realm. It's quite coincidental, isn't it?
Yes, sure is.
Where did it begin for you with Dogman? Because it's interesting, because Wisconsin is one of the original states for the activity with the Beast of Bray Road and all that. So for you, I mean, where did it start with you with Dogman and how it all began?
Well, if I were to go back when I was younger, I've always had a fascination with werewolves and stuff like that. And obviously, when you look at some of those stuff, it just brought me into the word Dogman. And obviously, first few years, I'd say you're more of a laptop researcher, reading stories and encounters and what happens, and that sparks your interest. And I've always had theories on what people were seeing, and I remember talking to Linda Godfrey once about those theories and what I thought about it, but it wasn't really until you begin to see stuff in the woods yourself that aren't explainable that you begin to go more into details on really figuring out what is a Dogman and all that stuff that has to do with it.
I agree 100%. That's basically where it all started myself as well, with fascination. And for the state of Wisconsin, the number one question I want to ask you, well, at least one of the top questions is, have you ever visited Bray Road?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Many years ago, I visited Bray Road, went up and down it. Although it wasn't an all road, because obviously it's more civilized now. But yes, that was the first road I visited when I came to Wisconsin was that one.
It's interesting with Wisconsin, with the whole activity with Dogman, the Beast of Bray Road, and for the fact being is that you've also yourself have conducted a lot of research in the time you've been to Wisconsin and living there. What would be the biggest factor you'd have to say that plays into being a researcher in Dogman? Like, what's the most important thing when you're out in the field? What is the thing that you look for? What is the number one thing you're out to get when you're in the field?
Behaviors. I think that's one of my biggest thing, obviously, because I deal with dogs, and behavior or knowing the why an animal does something can get you rather killed or save your life. And because there's many terrifying encounters that people have had, the idea of trying to figure out why they do something or the why of something can cause people to not only sleep better at nighttime because maybe their perception of what happened might be different, but also help them continue on with their lives. So I'm not really focused on pictures and stuff like that, although I have some things, but mostly on behavior and character.
Now, that's a first to a lot of researchers out there who, and I'm not saying in particular, but I'm just saying in general, when you're out in the field, you always want to get the best evidence. You want to get the best photographs. You want to get the best hair samples, best footprints, and whatnot. And of course, but for behavior instinct, that's also pretty interesting. Now, you mentioned beforehand when we were speaking about how we spoke of what you think in the theory of what their fascination of food is. Can you go into a little bit of detail about that?
Well, I've not only through my own research, but through my networking with multiple people that have Dogman in the property, I've realized that they're pretty much like a coyote or a normal wolf. They're omnivores. They take what they can get, and that sparked because when the group that I have in my property that were coming in and out, I realized that stalks of corn were rather ripped off or taken off from the top, and that really sparked a curiosity because when they were here, there was no deers around, there was no rabbits, birds weren't all over the place. It was a quiet property. Everything kind of had just vanished or left. So I was trying to figure out why is the corn disappearing. And so I started asking, I started, looking into that and whatnot. And I've realized through the networking and through other people's personal situations, not only my own, that they will actually take corn, they'll take fruits, watermelons, plums, and like any other canine, whether it's a coyote or a wolf, even though that might not be their main food source, it is a treat for them, which then comes to the conclusion why sometimes they're seen more during the harvest season. Well, obviously because of all these different treats that are being grown, they will probably be able to go there and take corn and take watermelons. Now, obviously, once you're there, you see a deer because they're probably there for the corn as well. Well, it's common sense for us to think that once they're there and they see a deer, they'll take down the deer. But in my mind are they there for the deer, or is the deer just a consequence of them being there for the first thing they were there present for, which was the fruits and the corns and the whatever is being harvested in that field.
That's an interesting theory too. It's not very common for people to say, "Oh, well, that's a corn," that they have a fascination with corn and that's their substance for it. And it's an interesting theory, and of course, I support it because it's a possibility, and on the verge of it. It's an interesting thing to think about because of what are their main food sources. You would think of deer, you would think of typical wildlife animals, but the possibility of a substance similar to what we eat as well, like corn, that is also pretty interesting, I will say. When it comes to sightings that you've collected or from sightings of your own, now, to give things off the record here, you yourself have ever had a Dogman sighting?
Multiple Dogman sightings, not only on my property, in other people's property, and in the woods itself.
Would it be okay if you would like to share a couple of those encounters, if you feel comfortable sharing them, of course, after all, or if you wish, share any other encounters that you've collected yourself, by all means, go right ahead.
Well, I'll start from my property. Probably the first time that I'll say saw something that sparked my curiosity. Somewhere around June, I went outside to grab the 34 bottles of water that you buy at, you know, Walmart or whatnot. And I saw two eye shines, and the object, because all you were able to see is this black figure on the floor, was kind of crawling towards me. So at first, because of the position of the animal, I thought it was a stray cat. But as I kept closer to the car and I was at the car, I was saying to myself, well, that's way too big for it to be our stray black cat. And I looked behind. Now, it's to be noted that in my property, there's no lights, there's no street lights. We only have one spotlight that it's at the front door, and that's it. Everything else is black. So you rather see the grayish of the, you know, of the property if there's a full moon, or you don't see nothing at all. So I always have a spotlight because we have coyotes around the property and whatnot. So I make sure that, you know, I'm always aware of my surroundings, as I do have animals. So once again, I'm trying to figure out what is this black thing on the floor. It's coming towards me. It's low to the ground, but it's too big to be a coyote or a cat for that matter. So I turned around and I walked, took probably a step or two towards it, and it just went backwards and reverse. Went forward again, and it just went backwards again. I'm trying to figure out what in the world is this crap. So I turned around back to the car, and I realized that it had gone forward again. So at this time, because it had gone forward, even though I went a couple steps towards it, I turned around and I this time I walked more towards it, and it literally just went in reverse, like putting a car in reverse, up to a tree that's in the property. And then the eyes, because you can see the eyes and the black outline, just gets up and hugs the tree, looks at me, and climbs up. As it climbs up, you can hear the branches, you know, some of the smaller branches break off, and it just stays on one of the taller branches and looks at me. Right there, that just, like, what in the world is this thing? Because whatever it is large, and it just grabbed the tree, stood, looked at me, and climbed up. That night, I grabbed the big containers of water, put them inside, went on back outside, and the eye shine was gone. That day, although it was kind of weird, and obviously the shape I can see, but I don't know what it is yet. I told my next door neighbor about what I had seen that day, and he tells me that he had a situation happen to him some days before, about some footsteps and some following him and some heavy breathing somewhere around 10:30, 11 o'clock at the trail. Now, where I live, there's a trail that goes directly into a marsh. So you can take that trail and go straight into the marsh. So, okay. He told me that tale. I remember me looking for, because he described some hyena-type laughs and some yips and some howls. So at first, my mind is not saying Dogman. I'm saying probably a Bigfoot or something, because it's common belief that in the marsh there's Bigfoots. And every vocal that I showed him, he said, no, that's not it. No, that's not it. But then, out of curiosity, because it was just curiosity, I went into the North American Dogman Project, and they have 3 vocals. And I don't quite remember which were the 3 I made him listen to. But once he listened to it, you can literally see his eyeballs flare up. You can see his hairs go up and say, yes, that's what it was. Now that sent shivers down my back, because now I'm starting to remember what I had seen days prior, and I'm like, well, great. Is this actually the Dogman that he's talking about? But the conversation stopped there. I mean, I showed him a couple of pictures of what Dogman is supposed to look like, but that was it. That week, remember, because it was a holiday, our normal trash day is on Wednesday, so he comes in on Thursday. You know, he took out his trash on Thursday. So our driveway is long, and it's like an H shape. So around 2 o'clock in the morning, where he goes to work, he took his trash, put it in the back of his pickup truck, turned around, and goes up to the main road. And as he's putting the trash at the corner before he goes to work, he remembers seeing that his headlights were being blocked here and there. And when he turns around to go towards the truck, as he's walking to the truck, he looks up and he realizes that there's this creature standing, pacing in front of his truck. he mentions, he saw the whole thing. It's in front of his truck with the lights. That same afternoon, he finds me outside, and he's like a little kid trying to tell a story to his father that is just surprised, hey, listen, I saw this, and I'm like, calm down, just what happened? So he starts, describing the thick hind legs, and I have a bulldog, which you've seen pictures of, who's very muscular, very thick. So he trying to use that as reference. He's always telling me, he has bigger hind legs than your dog. He has bigger muscles than your dog. So I'm trying to figure out, okay, how tall is it and stuff like that. And he starts giving me dimensions and whatnot. And in my mind, I'm saying, that's too big for a wolf and too big for a coyote. And then we're going back to what he said that he heard and what I seen. And I'm saying, chances are, you were just in front of a Dogman. So I started trying to ask him, what did it do anything? He goes, no, it was just pacing back and forth in front of the truck. It started yipping, but I just got into the car and left. So okay, now that started a 7-8 month journey in my property, in which we would see them. Rather, we were doing bonfires. Rather, I was going outside to grab the dogs to bring them in. Through the whole 7 months, they were there sporadically, probably every week or every weekend. You'd see 1, 2, or probably 3 or 4 at once. I remember one night I went out to take my dog. I let my bulldog go. My bulldog goes towards the house, and as I'm walking towards the front of the house, I see these 2 huge eye shines next to my mailbox. Now, my mailbox is about 4 feet high, and these eyeballs were parallel to the top of the mailbox. So if it was sitting down, it definitely, you have a 4-foot head, even though it's sitting down. But at the same time, because I don't have street lights, there's a ditch right in front of the mailbox. So if it was standing up, it would have been about 7 feet tall. And because it was dark outside, I can't tell you pretty much if it was standing up or sitting down in front of the mailboxes. That, in my mind, I'm still thinking, well, what is this? I'm not really thinking about what my neighbor had just seen. I put the bulldog inside and I walked towards it. As I walked towards it, all of a sudden, because I realized I was walking towards it, and I was getting closer, it moved towards its right, my left, and there's some bushes on the side of my yard, and it walked behind those bushes. And as it walked behind, I can see one eye shine through a little opening. And knowing what I know about dog training and trying to calm down in situations from work and whatnot, I began to talk to myself, but talk towards it, if that makes sense. And I remember telling him something around the lines of, hey, listen, I don't care if you're here, walk around the property, if there's trash that you want, take it, just leave me and my dogs and my family alone. And I walked back to the back of the house, which is a long distance, to get my other dog out of that kennel and into the house, because that's where it was headed. And I walked back after grabbing that, putting that dog in. I walked back, and I can hear it going back and forth, but I couldn't see it again. And that was for that night. I remember one night, me and my neighbor were doing a little bonfire, and the whole idea was to see if they would come near. And sure enough, there's one specific that is black with white that comes down from both sides of the ears and meets at the chest, which we believe is the alpha. Had come behind us, and my dog barked at it, and that's how we knew it was coming from behind us. From that night, from that point forward, we sat looking at each other's shoulders. You can hear them walk around the yard, in the cornfields. My dog would go nuts every so often. At one point, it started throwing rocks, pebbles, towards the shed that is next to where the bonfire is. And then we would never look towards where the rock came from. We would always look to the opposite direction, which kind of, I'm going to say, pissed him off a little, because at one point after the second or third pebble, I remember him having a grunt, like a, and then just walked away. And you can hear him just leaving, not running, but not walking either. And by then it was about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I told my neighbor, you know what, I think that's enough, let's go inside. And sure enough, we came inside. Another time during the beginning of them being here, and maybe it was because I walked up towards one of them. I remember we had a house fire here somewhere in June, July, and late June, early July probably, where the floor got burnt and the kitchen sink got burnt, whatnot. No structural damage, but some just the stuff that was here. So I remember that night because my parents were coming over for vacation to see their grandkid. I took the old kitchen sink and I put it outside. And at one point while I'm installing the floor, I'm trying to look for my utility knife. And I walk outside to get my utility knife. Now again, there's no lights outside. It's kind of gloomy. The only light that I have beaming out is of the kitchen light, and it's through the curtain, so it's not like a clear shot outside. It's here and there. So as I'm walking towards the utility knife, I remember feeling this primal instinct of flight or fight. I mean, it was just, my heart started racing, and it was just a feeling of dread. And my instinct started kicking in, so I really quickly looked behind me. And as I looked behind me, there's a white Dogman, and I know it was white because even though it was dark outside, you can clearly see him versus seeing a shadow. It was a clear, different color. It was like it should have been a gray or a white. Nonetheless, I say white because I saw him afterwards during the daytime. But he moved back to the side of the house while still watching me. And then again, I looked forward again because the feeling was like coming from the front. And I can see a black shadow. Not many details, but there was an object in front of me. And I quickly again moved towards my head. I put my back towards the wall and I looked forward. And I can see 3 more, not walking in the same speed as the first one that was in front of me, but kind of tippy-toeing towards me. And this just feeling of freaking dread is like, shit, you're in trouble. And I remember closing my eyes and, talking to myself, get a hold of yourself. You've been trained for stressful situations. Knock it off. Let's do this. And I had nowhere to run. So basically it was a fight or die, basically, because I was against the wall. So I remember opening my eyes and I looked forward, and in a calm but firm voice, I remember saying something around the lines of, knock off with this BS. I am not running. This is my house. Back off. The feeling didn't leave at that moment. And again, I closed my eyes and I said it again. And I slowly went down and I grabbed the utility knife. By then, the feeling had begun to subside slowly. And I just slowly turned around towards my left and walked back into the house. The door from where I was, I'd probably say maybe 7, 8, 9 feet maybe. I can't really give you a specific distance. But I walked back in, closed the sliding door, and I remember collapsing. There's a step that I have to step up to get to the door and then step out again. I sat there. My hands were kind of trembling, whatnot, and my wife walks in from the bathroom and says, "Are you okay?" I go, "Yeah, just give me a second." And then I got up and I began to, continue remodeling the kitchen. But that experience taught me something of neutrality, calmness, and standing your ground. not being a prey object, if you would put it that way, but being more of a calm and collective towards them. So once I figured that out, it was easier to be able to handle them being around than coming out your front door and, seeing them in front of you where the corn was and whatnot. So we've had several encounters here. Me and my neighbor once, it was funny. We were outside talking about everything, including Dogman, but mostly everything else in life. And his back is towards the trail, and I'm looking at him. And I remember seeing a black one move behind him far off, but he had come closer enough that you can see him completely walking. And my neighbor realized that I wasn't looking at him, and he was talking, but I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at behind him. So he quickly turns around and he sees nothing, and he says, What's going on? Oh, nothing. And don't give me that BS. What, the one just passed behind me? Yeah, just the black one just passed by. So he obviously turns around, and now he's looking back towards where the trail is, and he wouldn't turn his back again. But they've been on top of his pickup truck. One day it was around 8:30 in, I'd say, the afternoon. Since it was still spring, going into summer. It's still light outside. It's not dark, even though it's 8:30. I remember it was a lot of mosquitoes since we live close to a marsh. Some nights, some days are worse than others. But because of the amount of mosquitoes and stuff, he throws water on the bonfire, and you know how that goes. Throws a big ball of fumes and whatnot. And when he did that, there was a Dogman on the opposite side of the yard. Apparently, he had been looking at us for a while. And once he did that, that guy stood up, and his head was going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, like if he was scared out of his mind. And I remember him coming back, to get more water to put it out. And that guy, when he heard the second noise of the fire made, the crackling and whatnot, he bolted. And when he bolted, he went running on two legs past the tall grass. And he went on fours, back to two, and then back to four as he got to the trail. So I told my neighbor, hey, listen, let's go and try to intercept him on the trail and see which way did he go. So we grabbed our flashlights, and we have high-powered flashlights by then. So we go towards the trail, and when we got to the trail, I kind of realized that we have, the trail is very, has a lot of vegetation on both sides. And I'm like, you know what, let's go back. Because if this guy is in either side, we won't be able to see him. And we're sitting ducks here. So we started walking back. And as we walked back, I remember my neighbor telling me, did you hear that? And I go, no, I didn't hear nothing. He had heard a growl type from behind us. And I told him, no, I didn't hear nothing. So we got to the house, and by then it's like 9:30, give or take. I'd say it's not dark out, it's not light out. You can still see the grays, pretty good. So he had gone back towards where the water was to, picking up the hose and whatnot. And as I'm talking towards him, but not actually seeing him, I look towards my left, and this just ball of black came across the ditch, over the road, into the property, and just hugged a tree that was in the property. And all I saw was half of his head, the arm swung around the tree, and my first thought was, holy shit, this guy came back. So I started calling the neighbor, hey, come here, and he, what happened? Hey, come here, he's back. So I ran out a little bit towards my right to see where my neighbor was at, to him come back, and by the time I turned around and looked at the tree, he was gone. That day I realized how really fast these guys can be, which is scary at most, because you would never see them if they came in after you. But apparently he didn't like us chasing him, and we've learned that not to chase, because they don't like it. we also learned that day that they are not very fond of fire. And through the networking, we've found other things like firecrackers. They don't like that whole sound, fire, popping noise. So it's one of my weapons too when I go out on the field. Is having rather firecrackers or homemade torch, and that works beautifully. Tested and proven in different states. Then we had that's pretty much a cap of what's happened here in the property. I have an eyewitness, which actually I'll be headed down there today. We went looking for signs and whatnot, and we want to put a trail cam and put some recorders down there. The first day we went down there, and when we got to an area, now she's seen them on 4 legs, and her dimensions is 48 inches to the shoulder, which is a lot bigger than what a wolf would be. And she's seen them come towards the tree line and look at her, and she kind of feeds the wildlife, and I think that's what causes them to stay around. But anyways, when we were walking towards an area where she had seen one of them eat a dead deer, the dead deer was obviously moved, and we had gotten close to the area, and we heard this. I heard somebody describe it as a jake brake from a truck, loud. Only difference is this kind of resonance in our chest. So off the bat, you knew that, wait a minute, that's no, truck or anything, because it's powerful and it was directed at us. So I turned around and I had a little scope. So I started looking through the tree lines. It's across the river. So I started looking through the tree lines, and I see a black figure. So as I'm looking at the black figure, and it's like completely, stopped, not moving, I looked at her and said, "Do you see that over there?" And I pointed, and I looked, "Is that what I think it is?" She took the little scope and looked at it, and I think so. When we started pointing at it, it moved. Apparently, obviously seeing us point at it. And when it did move, that's when we were able to see the pointed ears and the hand. It was like 2 trees. You have one large tree and one smaller tree going from it. So you had one hand, which would have been probably his right hand. No, his left hand, kind of curled up on one tree, and its head was on the other side of the tree. We stayed there looking for it for a while, and we were trying to figure out if it would move, how much it would move, it would walk away and whatnot. And every time we point towards it, it would like move a little more. So at one point, I told her, "Listen, stay there staring at it until I set up the game camera." And I set up the game camera. By then, I came back towards her. It was gone. When I collected the game camera, probably 2 weeks later, the first few nights, probably the first 4 or 5 nights, you had complete silence on that camera, and it was set for video. When I say silence, I mean no tree frogs, no nothing, which is very rare because you have tree frogs and a bunch of other night sounding animals, all silent. We did catch on one night something that looked like it had a hump for a back, head low, really fast moving for a couple of seconds, but because of the tree lines, we weren't really able to, confirm what it was. So that chip was let's say erased and for further use. From that property, we had 2 howls, which I recorded after seeing something. I turned on the phone to record, came home, and I had the phone, the audio enhanced, and when it was enhanced, you're able to hear 2 howls, one in the beginning, one at the end. From there as well, we have recorded like barking, hooting, wooting sounds all in one. I think you probably have heard that one, which is interesting because some people, when they first hear it, they'll say, well, those are probably dogs barking. There's no dogs barking. There's 2 miles. The road to her house is probably 2 miles from the main road, and everything else is woods. She lives inside a very large section of woods. And her driveway is woods on both sides. There's only one house there where she's at, and it's an older couple that have no dogs. Everything else is just woods. Could it be wolves? Could it be coyotes? Maybe. But wolves don't make the wooting sound, which was in response to some of the barking. And the biggest significance of the recording is that when you start hearing it, you do have tree frogs, and through the audio, the tree frogs go silent, completely go silent. And then when everything quiets down, all of a sudden you have one tree frog make a noise, and that's where the recording stops. But the significance is that the night goes silent. The tree frogs shut up during this whole array of sounds and noises. And again, we got another recording from there in which there's a weird. It was the 4th of July. There was the recorder picked up some barking, some howling, which was kind of identical to the previous recording. But then there's a howl in there, and it's like a response to everything else, which is completely awkward and weird. I mean, it's like a whoa, whoa. I mean, I can't even really describe it, but it's weird. It's and you can, if I can send you that, you'll see or hear that it's out of place, completely out of place. I have never heard a wolf or coyote do that one, because it was just and in resonance is like. Later on, I'll send you that one. From there, I've had encounters in the marsh itself. We had one night where me and a friend of mine, we went there. Now he's a wildlife guide. He lived in northern Wisconsin. He moved down here to be close to the family, so he knows about wolves and stuff like that. And I invited him one night to go out. Normally I do my research during the daytime, and then I'll go out at nighttime here and there, depending on what I find during the daytime. So we went to a place where I had recorded some howls that were identical to some of the ones that were in the North American Dogman project, recordings of supposed Dogman howls. Now we had gone there. Now he makes parabolics. So we had 2 parabolics. It's about 9, 10 o'clock, and I told him, listen, that all the birds and the tree frogs all will go silent in a few. So he looks at me, whatever, we're eating some Twinkies and half a sandwich, and sure enough, all the birds left the area, and all the tree frogs just went silent. So as we're listening, he's all of a sudden telling me, "Hey, listen, do you have your headphones on?" I go, "No." I put them on. So I put them on, and sure enough, we started hearing footsteps from the right towards our left, slow footsteps, and we hear a loon call, but it wasn't a complete loon call. It was like an interrupted loon call. So it was like the first half of a loon call. And first we would think, well, it's probably just a loon, except there's no water sources there, and we all know that loons make their nests in waters. So there's no water source there, besides a little pond that's to our right, and the loon came from our left side. So we started to listen to the footsteps, and the 3, I'll say 3 footsteps, because eventually the footsteps stopped and some continued. So we had through audio, we had footsteps at our left hand, in front of us, and to our right. All of a sudden, my friend turns around towards his right really fast, and I looked at him and what happened? There's movement behind me towards my right. So I set the parabolics towards over there, and sure enough, there was movement towards his right, but behind us. So I said to myself, well, wait a minute, and I turned towards my left. And sure enough, there's movement towards my left and behind us. So now basically we're now in a half circle surrounded through the woods. And then he taps me and he says, "Look towards my right." And every so often, you'd have eye shine come out of the tree and back into the tree, come out of the tree and come back into the tree. So he focused, and sure enough, eventually we were able to see like half of the shoulder and whatnot. One of them was peeking through a tree, and it would look at us and come back, look at us and come back. I guess curiosity killed it, and he had a look completely. For I don't know, probably it was about 11:30, give or take. We heard some a vocal. I can't describe the vocal, but it was it was awkward, weird, as always. And we would hear the ones towards our left maneuver forward, and then you would hear all of them maneuver back into the woods. But there's one that stayed in front, and you can hear him heavy breathing, grunt growl type heavy breathing. And as you would hear the footsteps eventually fade off, you would then hear him fade off as he walked off. So it was an interesting night because you can hear them communicating, let's say, as to maneuver towards a situation, towards their positioning. Once they figured out that we were just there, probably that it was just me or something, because I do tend to pee, and it sounds funny, I know, but pee before I go into the woods in their area, just because of the fact that in my property, I normally, as any, I can't say any, but most men, if they're outside, they don't just go inside just to pee, they probably pee a tree. And I have a lot of property, that's probably the norm here. So my thought process is I'm letting them know I don't pee objects, I pee the ground. Letting them know, hey, listen, it's just me, I'm here. So anyways, that's just my thought and theory towards it. It has worked for me and others. But once I guess they figured out, he called them back out, and they just went behind the Alpha, because you can see that the Alpha stayed while the rest of them were headed off. Not see, but here. And then the Alpha, the last one out. So it's a very tactical maneuver, which was very interesting for us at that night. By 12:10, we looked at each other, and of course we've had enough, and we packed up and left. And I'm pretty sure I'm forgetting some of them here and there. But the last one that I had right now was June 11th, which was a couple of days ago. I'm sitting on my couch looking outside, nighttime. It's already about 12 o'clock, 12:30, talking to somebody about Dogman, who here in Wisconsin, and the lights are on, so the reflection of the back wall is reflecting off the glass of the sliding windows. As I'm talking to her, at one point I stopped looking at the TV and I looked at her. Looked at the wall, and I'm talking to her and whatnot, and I see this shoulder move, this white object move, and as it moved, you realize that it was a shoulder and hand. And I remember telling her, listen, I gotta go, I got visitors. And she kind of freaked out, like, don't worry about it, just, I gotta go, bye. And I hung up. So because it was late already, I had to bring in the bulldog. I packed up some food for the other dog, and I go outside with my strongest flashlight, and I'm looking around, and obviously I don't see nothing. I'm going in the opposite direction from where it went. So that was expected. At one point, I thought to myself, was I just seeing things, or is the white one back? So I went back, opened the fed the other dog, and opened the other dog's kennel. He runs towards the front of the house, and as he runs to the front of the house, the minute he hits the front of the house, his tail goes up, his head goes down, his ears go up, and he knows something was there. And he's walking slowly, sniffing the air, sniffing the ground, and he walked straight to where I had just seen the white hand shoulder. And he's sniffing really tight, tail tight, ears tight, forward. And he starts looking towards, the field in front of him and towards that direction where the trail is at. And you can see one paw was like kind of up, which is an indication that he's ready. And I'm like, okay, no, I know I'm not crazy. You know something's up. So I opened the door and I called him in, and he walks inside. And then it's funny because that night, all of a sudden my TV antenna all of a sudden gets no signal. And it's telling me there's no signal because of weather and obstruction of the signal. So what are you talking about? No obstruction. There's no wind outside. I have no strong winds, no nothing. And I looked at a satellite from Intellicast, and there's not even a cloud overhead. There's nothing. So apparently it was rather in front of the antenna, or probably tapped it or moved it a bit, whatnot, which caused that to happen because there was no wind, there was no weather, no nothing, which I thought was funny because he's now allowing me not to watch TV. But anyways, that was the 11th. From then on, I'm trying to get to see if they're all back or if he's just out scouting old grounds. So we're soon to find out if they've all returned back or not. I've had the day also we had an eyewitness who's seen the group that's up here down in southern Wisconsin. He mentions to me that he messaged me, and he tells me that his kid just told him that probably a year or so ago, when he was walking the trails where they normally go hiking in, a little family area, so it's small, that the black one was the white around the ear that goes down to his chest, had confronted him, or had come out of the woods and stood near him, and that he left because he heard the rest of the family coming from behind. So he turned around and left. So his son had just told his dad that had happened. I guess his son, because his dad asked him, "Why don't you tell me that before?" And I believe that the son didn't want the dad to freak out and not go back to that area for hiking. I guess they were very fond of it. It's like a Sunday tradition of going there and just walking around the woods. So hence why the son never told him nothing. Yeah, he told me that I think 2 days ago, and I'm still here, figuring out, talking towards eyewitnesses, to figure out the whole behavioral aspect of it. Because I do believe once you find out the why, you can, like I said, save yourself, protect yourself, or live in neutrality. I won't say live in peace, because if you do have farm animals and they're hungry, they might eat it. But at least live in neutrality, knowing what to do and what not to do. I think it's a very important aspect. I do not tell people what they shouldn't know. And by that I mean I won't throw theories out. I will only throw theories out. Not theories, but I will only throw out what I've learned to be facts. And facts for me is if I can prove in multiple states that this is what's happening, then that's what I'll lend out to help people. There's some things that people should only figure out by themselves, not for me to go out and tell them, because it will do nothing for their recovery. And I'm very big on having people recover fast from this ordeal, from their encounters, and get back to their normal lives. And there's things that people should not know and only figure out by themselves. Not that because now you have a person that's scared, freaked out, and now I'm coming in and putting more fear, more anxiety into them. That's not good. Hence why learning from their behaviors, learning from their characters, what makes them do this or that, why they did this or why they did that, and know how to respond is better for me and my goal than going out trying to find footsteps and trying to find hair samples and trying to find to prove that they exist. I know they exist. All of us who have had encounters know that they exist. So let's get past. I at least will get past that and go out towards the meat of the project.
Well, that's a very, for the time you've taken, I mean, that's a very interesting analysis. It's a very interesting array of encounters you've showcased from yourself and also eyewitnesses. And really, I mean, I don't know how else to really go on with that. I mean, it's really, you basically like lectured the class pretty well on that one, Ricardo. That's a very well given analysis on what you've discussed here today. But before we do go any further, I want to ask you a couple questions in relation to it. When you had your encounters, you mentioned, of course, of how you are in the field and what you bring as a source of protection. Do you fear that these things could easily overpower you if they had the integrity to, with the sense of if they felt that you were going into their territory feeling threatened? More importantly, do you feel that they would have, by this point, do you feel that you've built a respect barrier with them if they are bringing in homemade torches or in general weaponry to protect yourself into their woods? Do you feel that have you built a respect barrier, or at least feel that they would tear you up to shreds instantly if they felt that you were coming into their territory feeling threatened?
Well, like any other animal, if you're threatened, it doesn't matter what you bring. You're for this and that to protect yourself. If a dogman has a why, he's going to do it regardless. There's nothing I can do from a fast-moving animal coming at me. I've learned that, for instance, if a dogman is in front of you, always look behind you. You're going to get taken out by the guy behind you or the guy beside you. So it doesn't matter what you bring. When I bring stuff, I don't showcase it. They're in a pouch strapped to my thigh. Normally, I don't carry a backpack. Everything is in that thigh strap. But yeah, if they feel that you are a threat, you're a goner. Your biggest defense is learning behavioral skills. How they respond, how to be neutral, how to respond in case you have a confrontation, to show them. Because animals, any animal, learns body language really fast from the day they're born. It's like dogs. The best way to train your dog is not to speak and just use your body language to show them what you mean. Because every animal, the first thing they pick up is body language. So your biggest weapon that will save your life is learning body language and body mechanics when you're out there. Everything else is just secondhand. Knowing how to move, what not to do, how to do things through the woods. Going into the woods in peace. And by that I mean don't go out there smashing trees or whatnot, making a ruckus. Because if you make a ruckus, you're going to draw attention to yourself. And you draw attention to yourself, and I'm accidentally eating, and you know that you're going to have a bad encounter. And that goes with any animal. So go out there, quiet, peaceful, go look what you're going to look for, and go on your way. But yes, if they think you're a threat, you're in trouble. I don't care what you have on you.
Yes, I agree. Well, Ricardo, we're basically about to wrap up the show for tonight. I want to thank you again for coming on the show and discussing your views and your theory on Dogman, as well as sharing your encounters and other eyewitness testimony. Before we do go, however, would you like to promote or plug in anything you would like to showcase for the audience to take a look at, as well as a little bit of piece of advice you'd like to give them if they are interested in getting into the field?
Go slow. Go systematically. Don't just go in there. If you're going to go into the fields, obviously nobody can stop you. If you're going to go into the field, don't go gun-ho inside there. It's just not your territory. It's not your property, it's theirs. Remember that at any point, things can go wrong. So prepare yourself before going in there. Be prepared mentally and physically, because both of those can save your life. Nothing else will. Mentally, that's what I would like people to understand, is those aspects. And just, be respectful. Be mindful, but be respectful. Respect will get you a long way.
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100% with that. Well, Ricardo, we're going to wrap up the show. I want to thank you again for coming on. I want to thank you again for showcasing your stories. And as always, I would like to say Godspeed and be very careful in the bush. You take care, my friend.
You too, Chris.
You have a good night now.
You too. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. And that does it, folks. Another episode of the 10 Tales. You guys have a fantastic evening. Next week, stay tuned for another two-parter. We'll have Lisa from Dogman Encounters come on the show and do a two-parter for episodes 6 and 7. You guys have a fantastic evening.